Just keep an open mind.
Professor Russell had rasped to me over the bulky yellow phone as the seaplane made its final descent. You don't get into this business with a closed one.
I know.
The professor's distorted voice continued.
I know.
He suddenly sounded kind of sad, distant, or drunk. Before I could ask what was the matter, he had hung up, and the crappy breakfast I had wolfed down earlier nearly spilled out of my mouth as the plane performed what could only be described as a rough landing. The sea below was extra choppy, as it had been all afternoon. Even through the thick steel walls of the cargo ship that took me to the edge of the pole's crust, I could feel the icy cold waves beating down upon the ever-swaying structure. As I had originally boarded the seaplane topside of the cargo ship, I couldn't help but feel as though I was boarding a child's toy. Just looking at the flimsiness of the wings pushed forward a gruesome vision of my early demise amongst the choppy, half-frozen waves below. But I digress. Now that we had actually landed, there was only one thing on my mind: the white. You can read all the books, watch all the documentaries, but nothing can prepare you for the sheer magnitude of the white the first time you see it up close and personal. White, as far as I could see. Only white. At least, you'll finally get your white Christmas. Julie, my wife, had damn near shouted at me as I waved goodbye from the noisy and humid South American dock. I love you, I had shouted back, but the ship's wide double doors had slammed shut, and I wasn't even sure if she had heard me. But that was 100 years ago, a million miles away. At least, that's what it felt like as I glared at the all-white, unmoving tundra through the seaplane's fishbowl they called the window. This is your stop, pal. The pilot that hadn't said a word the entire trip told me with a crooked grin. I clambered out of the too small cabin, and my feet nearly slid out from under me as they hit the ice-covered, ever-swaying dock. A wide, tough-like weather hand caught my shoulder before I could fall completely on my ass. Welcome to Antarctica, a muffled, feminine voice that didn't match the hand grunted towards the ground. I looked upwards, towards the broad-shouldered owner of both the hand and the voice, to find a hood, an ice-encrusted scarf, and two beady eyes staring back at me. Professor Russell, the scarf said. Nice to finally meet you. Actually, the professor couldn't make it. My name is Garrison Cummins. I'm one of the professor's research associates. Oh, the scarf replied immediately, unable or unwilling to hide her disappointment. Name's Christine. Welcome. Christine began to reach into the cabin of the seaplane and remove my bags. It was at this point I remember truly taking in my surroundings. Not just the all-consuming, almost blinding whiteness, but the frigid, impossible-to-describe cold that came with it. Ahead of me was the outpost itself, Research Station 1231. From the sky, the building was a dot. Up close, it really didn't look much bigger. Professor tell you what you were getting into down here? I heard Christine mumble from inside the plane. An anomaly, I answered. That's just about all you would say. Christine laughed as her hood, her scarf, and those black eyes came back into my view. An anomaly. Christine nearly spat the words out. That's definitely one fucking way to put it. The tall woman dropped my bags into the snow and moved towards the pilot, handing him a wad of bills. Better get back to your ship, Christine said to the crooked grin staring at us through the plane's windshield. You don't want to be here at night. Too goddamn cold, right? I heard the pilot laugh. Something like that, she muttered back as the twin propellers began to whir. As the seaplane took off, I thought about asking Christine for more details, but before I could, the large, sullen woman turned to me with those beady eyes. You believe in all that stuff, right? What I talked about with the professor, I mean. All that weird stuff. Yes, I answered immediately. I kinda have to, I finished with a smile. She didn't return one. We were drilling. She started, her eyes as vacant as ever. I don't even know what. We just followed the orders given to us. We were drilling and drilling. She began to stutter, her eyes honing hypnotically past where I stood, as if she were looking right through me. And you found something? I gasped, trying to get her back on the track. At the bottom? She paused, Sort of smiling, sort of frowning, her emotions fighting an intermittent and very physical battle upon her face. "Well, that's just it," Christine finally continued in a low grunt. "That's just the thing. There was no bottom." The woman was cut off as a horrible crazed shriek coming from the base's main entrance penetrated through the wintry silence. A man sporting similar black eyes to Christine's, though only half the clothes, burst through the front door and clambered manically towards the seaplane, now in the air and well on its way back to the cargo ship. He was screaming and sobbing as loud as he could, his hands stretched toward the vibrant sky, begging the plane to come back. I heard Christine mutter at least 3 swear words before she approached the man, lifted her arm and sent him reeling to the snow-covered ground with a single almost casually clenched fist. There was silence again as Christine peered down at her fallen comrade. The man's face and mouth were covered in an impossible amount of blood. "You broke his nose," I exclaimed before I could stop myself. "No, I didn't," Christine said with a disturbing lack of worry in her tone. From 1231, 2 more faces appeared, all bundled up. "Sorry, Christine," one of the worried faces sheepishly called from the entrance. "He got through the cuffs." "Jesus fucking Christ," I heard Christine call out as she surveyed the nearly unconscious body before her. "Get him inside." As the 2 figures, both men, emerged from the entrance to get the slumped-over man back into the base, I took note of his left wrist. A pair of blood-covered handcuffs dangled uselessly against the ground. As for the crazed man's right wrist, it and the hand were gnarled, damn near to the bone. Bite marks. His own. "I guess I owe you some answers," Christine mumbled. A light snow began to fall as we headed towards the base. I paused. Froze was more like it. Beyond the structure, I swear, there in the white, I saw something stir within the snow. Something moved for sure. And yet, somehow, I didn't feel a sensation like I was being watched by a physical presence, but rather a shaky mental confusion, like something horrible and unseen and angry was staring right back at me from the nothingness of the flattened tundra. And yet, I was unable or unwilling to physically comprehend it. A hollow wind blew, and I felt a tingling in my spine I hadn't felt since I was a child when my parents took me to the Philadelphia Zoo for the first time. I remembered the boa, sitting tangled in its too small compartment. "Don't worry," the pimply-faced tour guide had assured me as the blood drained from my face. "He can't see us, just a mirror on the other side." But no, I knew that wasn't true. The way those black, predatory eyes glared back at me through the thin protective glass. The way my young mind wandered to a gruesome conclusion of what would happen if it was feeding time, and that large glass pane suddenly poofed out of existence as if it had never been there in the first place. Later, I would recall this moment of recollection with great fascination, once I truly had a grasp of the primal horrors I was facing here at the icy far end of the earth, as if my mind knew what I was up against and was trying to warn me with a fleeting memory. The thin pane of glass, and all it stood for, as if it had never been there in the first place. "Christine?" I called far too loudly, too cowardly as I watched the 4 figures shuffle into the relative safety of the base. "Wait for me." The snow was now falling much heavier, the wind whipping the large flakes into a frenzied swirl. As I tore my glance away from the white and away from whatever it was that was making my breath labored and my movements tense, I took note of the look on Christine's face. The same half smile, half frown from earlier, as if she knew exactly how I felt. I nearly fell out of bed at the sound of the nighttime alarm, a blaring shriek they didn't quite prepare us for as we trained for the job. See the world, make money, be a part of something. What a crock. Tompkins stuck his head in the room even though my tits were hanging clear out. He didn't even seem to notice. "Should I get the gun?" he barked. "Not so fast," I shouted over the alarm as I struggled to grab a bra that wasn't too twisted to hell. "What's going on out there?" "It's the hole. The fucking hole." See, what they don't prepare you for when you get to Antarctica is just how much goddamn snow there is. I know that sounds stupid, but until you see it, you just wouldn't believe it. So when a weird bitch in a too small suit offers you 6 figures to watch a bunch of old hits shovel fucking snow for 6 months, hell, you don't really think twice. I sure didn't. But goddamn, the first day that little shitbird dropped us off, I knew I was in over my head. You'll be using a drill, the woman told me. She introduced herself as a doctor. Pretty standard stuff. I sit through a mouthful of stuffed flounder I was enjoying on the company's dime. So why all the secrecy? The contracts? Hell, the fucking money. She didn't even flinch when she asked the next part. Miss Hart, do you believe in God? The conversation only got weirder from there. Christine! Tompkins, screaming my name, snapped me back to it as I approached the hall of the base, the unending alarm really beginning to piss me off. Tompkins, shut that goddamn alarm off. I surveyed the surrounding research shanty and was met by the faces of the damned. Of course, the rest of the team always looked like that. Besides Tompkins, security, there was the Quigley brothers, Ad and Lawrence, the Brit engineers that designed the fucking super drill. Next to them stood Art Hinckley, our doctor for research and medical purposes. Then there was Brian Parker, our cook, as well as Sid Jenkins and an Inuit we think was previously homeless we just called Hal. Together, the two of them made up our brute labor force. God fucking bless him. The only one missing was Michael Hart, my fucking brother and the only man that could possibly find a fix even at the cold-ass end of the earth. Where's Michael? I shouted just as the alarm died down. I cursed and rubbed my throbbing temple. Hell, Sid, he was the one that pulled the alarm. Tompkins shouted excitedly, as if the fucking thing was still blaring. Sid, he ran back to the hole right afterward. Tompkins? I cut him off. Take a fucking breath. Hal? Yes, ma'am. Hal grunted politely through a salt and pepper Santa beard. You saw Michael pull it? Yes, ma'am, he said again, pointing down the hall, towards the back of the base and towards the hole. The hole we've been drilling for weeks now. The hole that just kept going and going and going and going. And what exactly are we looking for? I had asked the good doctor after she explained the drilling process during our orientation. Whatever it is you find, she answered with a smile. So we drilled. We drilled with the biggest goddamn drill I'd ever seen. Apparently the Quigleys came to the company's attention after developing a remote drill that could reach the bottom of the Pacific, but was light enough to be towed. Later, Ed would tell me that the company only had one question before they signed the check. What if you made it bigger? Do we all have to go out there? Brian asked lazily as I grabbed the nearest thermal coat off the rack. Only if I tell you to, I barked back. I took a quick glance at the wall clock. Nearly 4 a.m. Shit, I muttered, already missing my bed. Hal, Sid, Dr. Hinckley, come with me. I'll grab my bag, the doctor said with firm dignity, even for 4 in the fucking morning. I should come too. Tompkins practically whined, somehow already holding the base's only firearm, a single-shot rifle I begged the company to keep locked up. No, and put that fucking thing away before. I was cut off by a scream, a horrible fucking scream. It echoed through the walls of the base with a reverberating howl that was barely human. Whoa, I heard Sid mumble after a moment. Holy shit, Michael, what the fuck? I muttered as I tore the rifle from Tompkins' hands. A chorus of, "We're coming too," followed as practically the entire crew bellowed it in unison. The hole itself was created just behind the base's main structure, as were our orders. The Quigleys' drill was actually built directly atop the base's reinforced roof, attached to a crane that allowed it to stretch up to 2,000 feet. Not that it needed to. A steel cable as thick as a grown man's arm snaked around the entire base, built into the walls to keep both the drill and structure stable throughout the process. I didn't ask, but Lawrence told me it could stretch for miles and was the main pulley system to keep the drill going until it hit something. Of course, that was the problem. It never did. I felt the penetrating cold before I even rounded the corner leading to the rear entrance. As we reached the already open rear, I motioned the team to give me some room. The wind from outside was whipping up a storm in what was once our main dining hall. Now it just looked like the inside of a fucking walk-in freezer. "Everybody back!" I shouted as I pulled an emergency flare out of a first aid kit hanging on the wall. Before I could even light the fucking thing, one of those unearthly screams caused the entire team, myself included, to practically jump out of our skins. A split second later, Michael was running through the rear entrance, completely goddamn naked. "Michael?" I shouted. "That's impossible." I heard the doctor squeal as he made his way towards the first aid kit and snagged the small thermite blanket from within. We gathered around Michael as he shook and shivered upon the floor. "Somebody get that door shut," Tompkins shouted. Nobody budged. "Michael?" I asked as the doctor wrapped him in the warm material. "Michael, what is it? What's happening?" "The hole," he shuddered, pointing a blue and blistered bony knob of a finger towards the rear entrance. "What about it?" Tompkins demanded. Michael stopped shivering for a moment and turned his head, the coal black eyes we both inherited from our mother penetrating my very soul as he faced me. "Dad says, keep the door unlocked tonight," Michael whispered through chapped lips. "Keep the door unlocked. It's been a long day." And then he began to howl with laughter. I stood up to keep myself from knocking his goddamn teeth out. The feeling passed, however, as another one of those earth-shattering screams echoed through the base. "Holy Christ," Tompkins muttered. "That's coming from outside." "No shit," I mumbled as I lit the flare. I tossed the bright thing outside into the cold, snowy darkness. All was quiet as the blinding flame tip rolled across the tundra and towards the hole. Darkness danced around the orange-red glow with an eerie, hollow precision. Nothing. The flare rolled to the crest of the hole, stopping idly just at the lip, just close enough to illuminate the face of my dead bastard of a father climbing to the top of the hole with casual elegance. We gasped. He smiled. He waved. And then, just like that, he let go, disappearing into the bottomless darkness. I fainted just as hell forced the rear entrance closed. "Do you believe me?" I asked. Garrison paused, but didn't look up from his notebook. "The professor did," I said, when I spoke to him over the phone. "Well," Garrison finally started. "If he didn't, he wouldn't have asked me to come." I smiled, kind of. He went back to writing. "What did the company think about my coming here?" he asked. "They didn't. I'm paying for you to be here." He stopped writing, but only for a moment. "And what happened next?" Garrison finally asked me from across the small office we had constructed in the former dining hall. A large tarp covered the intrusion in the floor's center. "After you passed out?" Garrison continued. "A lot," I answered as casually as I could. My gaze wandered through the glass window to my left, toward the now setting sun. The pretty reds and yellows and oranges danced just so off the mouth of the hole. "But mostly," I finally continued, "this is the part of the story where people started dying." "A fucking Wendigo," Tompkins nodded excitedly towards Hal. "Right, man? That's what you guys call it, right? A Wendigo?" Hal grunted, though he didn't say a word, his usual go-to response to any question you asked him. "Calm down, Tompkins," I said as I fished some stashed ammo out of the cupboard by the rear entrance. The company wouldn't let me lock up the gun, only the ammunition. Figure that one out. The screaming never stopped. Not ours, I mean. Whatever the hell it was that lived inside that fucking hole. Since the incident with Michael, now an hour ago, none of us dared to catch a wink. And every so often, even through the howling wind and the falling snow, we'd hear that ungodly, unearthly shriek. The shriek of the damned, we would later say. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. The dog returned from Michael's room. Once we got him some fresh clothes, I had him secured to his bed just to be on the safe side. Your brother, Christine. Dr. Hinckley started, then stopped. Does anybody have a cigarette? Nobody spoke up. He's unwell, the doctor continued, a little defeated. Of course, after what we all seem to experience, maybe none of us are well. Mass hallucination, the Quigleys shouted in unison. I hate it when they did that. That's a thing, Ed continued triumphantly. I read about it. So is Wendigo, Tompkins chimed in. Jesus, Tompkins, Sid started as he began lighting a cigarette, much to Hinckley's evident dismay. Shut it. Quiet, everybody, I barked. Now if we're going to figure out what the hell is going on here, we're going to have to. I was cut off by yet another howl. I swore this one was coming from underneath us. I'll make some coffee, Parker mumbled sheepishly as he scuttled towards the kitchen. Holy shit, I cursed as I rose from my chair, stole the cig from Sid's mouth, took a long puff and handed it to the doc. It wasn't tobacco. Nice, I heard the doctor mutter after a quick inhale. Ed? Lawrence? I called, trying to get the Brits' attention. Can we get somebody on the radio? From the company? One of them asked. No, goddamn Santa Claus, I shouted, now addressing the entire room. Guys, please, meet me halfway here. I took my previous seat and leaned against the rifle with my forehead, suddenly feeling very exhausted. Parker walked over with a used paper cup filled with what the company called coffee. Thanks, I managed as I took the small cup. There was a long moment of silence. What did everyone see? I finally asked. What did they see come out of the hole? There was another moment of nothing, the muffled rushing wind from outside being the only real noise within the entire base. My wife, Sid was the first to say. Been dead though, been dead a long time. Mine too, Tompkins piped up, the excitement from earlier now nowhere to be found in his voice. My wife, there she was, plain as day, he gulped. Cancer took her 7 years ago. Car accident, Sid said as the two men nodded at one another. Our mom, the Quigleys added in unison. Maya, a patient, I heard Dr. Hinckley mumble. A former. Tommy Perkins, Parker practically spat, a cup of coffee shaking in his grasp. In high school, we were close until college. He left. I stayed. Parker trailed off. For a moment, nobody said a word. Suicide, he continued, somewhat reluctantly. 4 years ago. At least, that's what I heard anyway. My father. I finally spoke. The day we buried him, Mike and I threw a fucking party. And yet, there he was, smiling right back at me in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a goddamn snowstorm. I hadn't realized I was shouting until I saw the look on the men's faces. I took a deep breath and tried my best to lean back against the freezing wall behind me. It's insane, I said, mostly to myself, as I tried to settle my nerves. Totally goddamn insane. Ijirak. Hal grunted. We all turned to face him at once, surprised to hear something other than a yes or no come out of his mouth. Not Wendigo, Hal continued. Ijirak, the face, it. The old Inuit made a sweeping gesture in front of his own face and grunted. Changes, he finished. Changes? What do you mean? Thompson asked. Word. Hal stammered, searching for the phrase. Shifts. The shape. Shape shifter, I said. Hal pointed at me and nodded, the smallest of smiles briefly flashing within his beard. Daughter, he said as the smile quickly vanished and a stark redness I had never seen before invaded his naturally dark eyes. Small, he continued with gagged words, holding his hands together in a spherical shape no bigger than a football. Too small. We nodded in silence. Until... And then, with absolutely no warning, The floor in front of us started to buckle. The concrete shifted, and a digging sound, like I had never heard in my life, began to fill the entire room. Not like a machine though, like hands and claws. It was even closer this time. Too close, we were about to find out, as something very big and very strange and very angry was coming through the floor, whether we wanted it to or not. I recall reading that name in the headline on the local paper. I could barely pronounce it, and I was struck by how unusual a name could make it to the front page. And then I saw the picture. Oumuamua, the Scout. That's what we're going to call it this time. Appropriate. That long, slender form that the so-called experts refer to as cigar-shaped. The very phrase conjures up notions of southern yokels taking a wrong turn and coming across invaders from outer space. Personally, I think it looks like a cat turd, but that's just my professional opinion. The first time I came across one of these cigars, I was a child. It sliced through the night sky above my father's ramshackle farm, no higher off the ground than a kite. I watched as the unusual object flew overhead twice, and then it landed. Or rather, it passed. It passed right through the ground, right before my eyes. I could only watch helplessly as the long, slender object seemingly phased through the brown and green earth before me. That evening, I had tried desperately to explain what I had seen to my father and received a passive, booze-soaked backhand for my troubles. For the rest of the night, I lay in bed, staring through my single-bedroom window, watching the exact spot I had seen the massive structure pass through the ground as if it were made of thin air. In many ways, though I was a small boy, this was the start of my career as what the mainstream media would describe as a paranormal investigator. As years passed by, I had begun to accrue a vast knowledge of the unknown. Starting at my local library, I ate up whatever scant information I could find on aliens and ghosts and goblins and shapeshifters and monsters and things that went bump in the night. I eventually discovered Z-list magazines that covered the strange and macabre and welcomed readers to send in any information they might have on their own first-hand knowledge of such subjects. The night my father found those magazines, he beat me so hard and his face became so beet red that I was sure he was going to have a heart attack right then and there. But no, the attack had waited, coming 2 weeks later as he watched his favorite Phils playing his favorite game while guzzling his favorite cheap beer. He called my name as he died. I ignored him, something I never told anybody. The way his voice was pitched with a desperate nervousness I had never heard before, I knew something bad and final was coming. But I didn't make a sound. I only found him as I left through the front door with as many belongings as I could fit into the overnight bag I had received from one of my magazines for being a subscriber. The TV was still on, and the old man's eyes were still wide open, though the light, what little light was ever there, was long gone. I voiced my opinion that he was what I considered to be an inadequate father, and then I left. But I digress. I apologize. The mind has a habit of wandering when you've hit this stage in your life. The no going back stage that seems to pitch a perfect balance between tranquility and sheer madness. Oumuamua. Oh, that name. You know, the more I think about it, the more it does kind of grow on me. Anyway, years began to pass. I had turned my newfound orphan status into a liberating license to travel the country. I used whatever resources I could get from one place to another, sometimes trading whatever it was I needed to get by. Eventually, I began to amass money in more devious ways than I ever dared to admit. But whatever it was that got me to my goal, I did not care. At that time, nobody really asked questions anyway, and a lonely teenager hanging out at a rest stop was just something you didn't need to know about. Besides, I can tell you that most of my customers were far from what might be described as queer anyway. Seeing as I find myself in my present condition, I guess I don't really have a problem admitting that lots of stolen wedding rings would eventually pay for most of my tuition. There seemed to be an unspoken rule that the ring had to come off before lying with me. Easy enough to lift as the John would lie in the cheap motel bed, The post-orgasm stupor leading to a full sleep of images of my bruised and battered insides. But again, I digress. University was a figurative breeze, minuscule semesters passing in the blink of an eye. My years of lonesome wandering hadn't prepared me for the social aspect expected of a young college freshman. Just as well, more time to pursue the real subject I cared about. The only subject I cared about. The thing that would eventually be called Oumuamua. I began to research other similar sightings. It wasn't hard, of course, as at that time, a UFO craze was sweeping the nation, and there seemed to be a new report on the evening news at least once a week. The old cliches began to turn into the norm. An old married couple returning from a party, a single father working late and was just returning home, the young high school couple canoodling on Lover's Lane, interrupted by a cigar-shaped thing. A terrible device not from this world. They were right, of course. It's not from this world. But then again, the recent reports. This newly discovered Oumuamua just drifting by our realm, it wouldn't be right to call it alien either. Well, it's alien in the sense that it's strange, different, unexpected, but not in the sense that it's from another planet. Just another world. And that world, the one they faced into, the one they faced through to. It sucks, of course, for a lack of better phrase, finding out your entire civilization, your entire world history, your entire population, all the petty squabbles of politics and religion and the day-to-day grind, love, sorrow, happiness, sadness, glee, horror, all of that rich stuff that makes up our planet. Useless, undeniably useless when you come to realize you are nothing more than the last rest stop on the way home. On the way back to the real plane where death is just the entry fee. Which brings me to Antarctica. That pathetic woman and those lost souls sent to the end of the world to discover something we're not even equipped to understand. That damned company that put them up to it. That put me up to it. And poor Gary Cummins, the only student that actually applied for the apprenticeship. My only friend. They could drill from the South Pole right on through to Santa's living room floor. They wouldn't find a thing. And yet, that company, this project of theirs, they just wouldn't let up. They had recorded the heightened electromagnetic activity. They even had witnesses, dozens actually. The crew of an oil tanker that had gone too close to shore had seen the fucking thing right there in snow-heightened broad daylight. Watched as it faced on through to the other side. They just wouldn't let up, and so one of those things decided to make its presence known on its own accord. And fucking Oumuamua, or whatever the hell it is they do call themselves, has come out of hiding. If the earlier sightings were a Greyhound bus with a fast lane ticket to the plane, that monstrosity currently circling our doomed blue marble might just be the goddamn Titanic, ready to surpass the ultimate toll, reap the ultimate reward. The end. That's what's coming. And to my fellow kin, my earthly comrades, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the part I played in orchestrating a worldwide disaster our biblical tomes have not even come close to preparing us for. I'm sorry. 1,000 times. May Oumuamua forgive me. The preceding text was found, seemingly quite hastily typed upon an open laptop in the home of Professor Anton Russell. The professor's body was discovered lying upon the floor of his bedroom. Though in his hand he grasped a pistol, it remained unfired. The official autopsy revealed a sudden and massive aneurysm as the cause of death. Professor Russell left behind no wife and no children.